Welcome to Board Game Casual. In this video, we're taking a look at a fun little trick-taking game, Disgraced House. I'll talk a bit about the game and its production, what makes it unique, who I think it's for, what I like most, what I like least, and I'll wrap it up by giving it a final score. Let's get into it. Disgraced House is a suitless trick-taking game for 2 to 6 players, where you and your opponents are playing as competing samurai cat clans, vying for political influence. This is a unique deck of cards, which as mentioned, doesn't have any suits. Each card, however, is double-sided. By default, you play a card using its black side. However, you can spend a fate token when you play a card to play its red side instead, which is a really fun twist and a nice way to squeak out of a tight spot when you're in a pinch. There are also ally and advisor cards that you can play which give you instant or ongoing effects. In fact, the first choice you'll make at the beginning of the round is whether to keep the ones you're dealt or discard either the ally or advisor cards or both for fate tokens. Tricks are played with the last played highest card winning the trick, except for the last round called the Peace Treaty. In the last round, the person who plays the highest card is out. They are disgraced for playing too strong a card during the Peace Treaty and score no points. All other players score points based on the value of the card they played, half the value rounded up. So it's this fun balance of not wanting to play too high that you're the highest, but the higher card you play, the more points you can score. When leading a trick, you can play a single card or a pair, and the other players then have to play a card, or 2 cards if the first person played a pair, in equal value or higher. If they can't, then they must play their lowest card or cards. This makes for some really interesting gameplay. Even if you don't win the trick, playing higher cards can be used as a way to force other players to drop their lowest cards before the Peace Treaty. The hand size is dictated by how far the highest player token is up the scoring track. So your hand sizes are going to get smaller and smaller with less total tricks to win as the game goes along. The goal is to be the first person to reach 13 points. Disgraced House is pretty easy to teach, fairly easy to learn, especially for experienced board game or card game players, and it plays quick and at a really good pace. This is the type of game where it's really easy to play a few times in a row back to back. I think this is a game that's meaty enough for hardcore gamers, but I also think I could probably teach this to people who are used to playing a lot of older card games. I did teach this to my girlfriend's mom and aunt who like to play 5 Crowns, for example, and they did okay. It took them a while to get the hang of the Peace Treaty phase, and I think the 2 card tricks were a bit of a stumbling block for them, but they really started to get it towards the end. Now, I'm not necessarily good at trick-taking games, but I really enjoy them. I really like that this game doesn't feel too punishing. I never feel hopeless or stuck, or feel like one bad play is going to completely take me out of the game. Especially with those fate tokens, I can usually pat myself on the back for at least a few clever moves. The ally and advisor cards have a pretty good amount of variety and some really fun powers in the game. I really like the Simpleton, which changes the condition of the trick to lowest card wins. It's a fun move to be able to play and snatch up a quick win. This is great when you have a 0 card, or can use it when you're the last person to play a card in the trick. The Extortionist is interesting, because you actually put this on an opponent, and now every time they spend a fate token, it goes to you instead of the supply. Depending on the hand you're dealt, however, discarding those ally and advisor cards for fate tokens could be equally, if not more powerful. There are definitely times where I've been dealt an ally or an advisor where I'm not too sure if I'd actually be able to capitalize on their powers, and the fate tokens just seem more useful, especially since they can be carried over to the next round if they're not spent. Overall, the production of Disgraced House is pretty good, considering it's from a smaller, independent publisher, Shiny Pigeon Games, but it's certainly stronger in some areas than others. The art and the graphic design are fantastic. The samurai cats are whimsical and eye-catching and really help to up the excitement when bringing this game to the table. The rulebook is well written with some great examples that seem to answer any question that popped in my head. My biggest beef, however, is that the rulebook is so small with such tiny text that it's almost impossible to read. At the very least, it's not a comfortable experience trying to thumb through these tiny instructions. I actually just went to the website on my laptop and opened up the PDF because it was so much easier to read that way. As great as the cards look, the quality of the cards themselves are okay. To be honest, while I've certainly experienced worse cards, these feel a little cheap. And for a game where you're constantly handling the cards, shuffling the cards, dealing the cards, I just expect them to be better. I'm going to be a lot more critical than if these were cards where you're drawing an endgame goal that you just set aside the entire game, for example. I picked this game up at Game Market West, and it came with a holographic Emperor card as a promo. This is a much nicer card, and I wish the rest of the cards in the game felt more like this one. The wooden bits are pretty standard here, a couple of wooden cubes in different colors for each player, and several wooden discs for the fate tokens. I'm sure they had portability in mind for this game, but like I've said in several other videos, I find these tiny wooden cubes to be really fiddly when moving up the scoring track. They just kind of stick to your fingers and are easy to get bumped. I wish they were a little bigger or had more heft to them. At least with the fate tokens, they're basically just a counter, so you're not really doing any precision movement with them. The game box looks and feels great. I love the glossy cover and it feels well made. But overall, it feels a bit too snug, and I wish they used a box with just a little bit more space. I generally am not a fan of card sleeves, but this is a game I'd actually consider sleeving in order to better protect the cards. But the box is so small, I'm not sure I could actually fit the cards back into the box once they're sleeved. Also, the little area in the box for the wooden bits is really tight if you're storing them all in a baggie first. And if you're someone like me, you like to pack up all the player components separately to keep everything organized, which there really isn't enough room for. While I appreciate the ingenuity to just use more cards to make up the score track, it doesn't feel as premium as having a dedicated board, and the card-based track has a tendency to slosh around when you're moving the tokens on it. So I do wish the box were just a bit bigger. At least that way I'd have room to maybe substitute my own bigger components in if I wanted, and it would give enough room for a larger rulebook and maybe a dedicated scoring track as well. Now, all that said, the version I have, I'm sure, is from one of the early low-print volume runs. I believe Shiny Pigeon Games is gearing up for a bigger production run, so it's possible they're already addressing some of these nitpicks. By the way, one thing I do want to take a minute to shout out is how the lanes on the scoring track are nice and wide. One of my biggest pet peeves in board games is where the scoring track spaces are so small they can't fit more than one player token, much less all the player tokens. And I absolutely hate having to stack player markers in a single space. It's extremely fiddly. It's always the bottom token or one in the middle that needs to move on the next turn, and it's always asking for trouble if things get bumped accidentally. So it's awesome when you come across a game with nice big spaces where everyone can move their token into and out of without having to stack on top or under another token. Kudos to the wide lanes. I hope other game makers take note here. Okay, let's talk about what I like most about Disgraced House. I really like the ability to flip a card with a fate token. It's such a fun mechanism and makes you feel really powerful when it wins you a trick or during the peace treaty. I like the balance of trying to play high to win tricks, but then saving a card that isn't too high or too low for the peace treaty. The advisor cards can be fun, but they're trickier to play compared to the ally cards, which can make for some really clever moves. I love that discarding those cards for fate tokens can be equally, if not more, powerful. I love how quickly this game plays. Turns are fast, and it's an easy game to play back to back. As I mentioned, I love that the scoring track can fit tokens side by side without stacking. In terms of what I like least about Disgraced House, well, The 2-card tricks always end up being a little bit clunky. There's always a debate about what can follow a 2-card pair, and confusion on how it works, especially with new players. As I mentioned, I wish the cards were better quality for a game where you're handling the cards this much. And also, I wish the box, components, and instructions were bigger with a beefier single-piece scoring track. Final thoughts on Disgraced House. I was really surprised by this little game. Disgraced House is so much fun. If you're into trick-taking games, this is definitely one you should check out, since being suitless and the card flip ability make for such an interesting twist. Or if you're someone looking to dip your toe into a trick-taking game that isn't overly intense or punishing, I think this makes for a great introduction to trick-taking as well. This is a game I'm happy to have on the shelf as a warm-up or a filler game, or for those nights where I might have a good mix of people that are new to board games, especially since it can play up to 6. The ally and advisor cards bring in some really fun powers, and I'm really hoping they'll offer a small expansion that just introduces even more ally and advisors. In terms of scoring, I'm giving Disgraced House an enthusiastic 8 out of 10. Honestly, this game could have probably scored even higher if it had the production quality of something like Splendor Duel. Regardless, this is a great game. It feels classic and fresh at the same time. Kudos to Kenner and Parker over at Shiny Pigeon Games. I really think they have something here, and I hope people catch on to what a great game this is. If you've played Disgraced House, I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. And if you're interested in hearing how I and 3 of my friends each ranked Disgraced House against 6 other games we played over a Board Game Casual Con weekend, be sure to check that video out on the channel. I've got the link down in the description. Thank you so much for watching, thank you for liking and subscribing, and I'll see you next time, here on Board Game Casual.